one. We're live. JC, welcome to the studio, my man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good to hear, man.
Well, wait, hang on. What was that? Frame rate drop.
Oh, you're good, man. I'm just taking a little sip. But hey, man, I kind of put it on Twitter, but I want you to hear it straight from me. I feel like this is a gift because I have been following your tweets for a while. And I think the first time I saw the first tweet, I wasn't as deep down the rabbit hole as the time. And over time, I've come to read more and more into your tweets, more and more into the articles you send me. And it's honestly going to be a treat for me, I feel like, to talk to you today and hear some of your thoughts. But for the people who are in chat who may not know who you are, let them know a little bit about your interest, what's going on with you, just so they can kind of, as a frame for this conversation, know where you come from.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm JC. I've been working in VR since, about 2014 or so. Very, very, very big fan of all things technology. And basically, I've kind of spec'd my life around being an expert in human-computer interactions, design and things like that. So that's kind of where I come from. And for pretty much my whole life, I've been obsessed with this idea of, human augmentation. Because, there are certain things you don't like about, just life in general or yourself or your body or whatever. And it's like, you look back in time and you're like, oh, well, life seems to get better the more technology we have. And the further back you go, the more miserable it seems to get. So from then on out, I was like, all right, cool. This is my mission. We make things better.
Is that a little bit where I read through we don't have to get into the articles right away, but I had never looked into the definition of transhumanism. And I liked your smaller definition, which I actually wrote down because like that, I kind of hit a little bit. Now I understand where this could lead to discussion, but transhumanism is the idea that improving things with technology is always a good thing. No limits, yes to people. Of course, that was the dumbed down, more direct quote in your article. But it sounds like that's kind of the reason maybe for this online avatar I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all right, hang on. I think I got to close chat. I think it's killing my frame rate too much. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the cool things about being in VR and VRChat and the mirrors and stuff is VR lets you hack your self-image, right? You can totally just be who you want to be. And so VR with body tracking kind of lets you have a playground version of this, right? Like a safe test bed version of, oh, cool. Would I be different if I had like a tentacle for an arm or an extremely long grip reach or whatever? VR just lets you play with that safely without necessarily having to commit to something.
How long did it take when you had, when you started making, I think you've been working, I kind of followed it for a while. You've been working on this avatar. I've seen kind of iterations and things you're working on. First time you jumped in with an avatar of your choosing, what's that progression like? You start looking in the mirror and maybe it's just sixed off base settings. Then maybe you find an avatar that tracks your lip tracking to a degree, body tracking. What's that progression of, hey, this is an avatar, to when you started feeling more literally that's you in that mirror? Because I noticed that when I played VRChat, it kind of was a slow progression.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I mean, the first time I ever tried an avatar of any kind, it was actually because I was in California for a couple weeks working on my first networked piece of VR software. And so we had downloaded these models off the asset store and, used them as placeholders or whatever. And so they were these, cute little animal face things or whatever. And just, seeing other people around you, it's weird because like at that point it was just a head and like the leap motion hands, the little gray things. But almost right away, you get a sense that like a person is like endosizing those pixels, right? It's like, the opposite of an exorcism. Like there's a spirit going into it instead of a spirit being dragged out of it.
Sure.
And so from there, I did a few more avatar experiments, mostly just with leap motion hand tracking, right? Because that was sort of what I used for my day job. Because when I'm working in VR, I'm really trying to take a person and a machine, and I'm trying to get them to be extremely symbiotic with each other, as closely connected as they can be for the comfort of this particular user. That's what we're shooting for. And so I immediately went for the hand tracking, because your brain has just this huge portion of the motor cortex dedicated to hands. Like you can really sense things through your hands, man. That's crazy. But yeah, so that was sort of the next progression. Sixed off head tracking, hand tracking. And then things definitely went to the next level when I did VRChat.
Absolutely.
And that was because like, so VRChat, as far as I've been using it, has always had a full body component, right? The animator, like they always animate a full body, even if it's not necessarily tracked. But the other thing I really liked about VRChat was you going through and you're finding the public models, and there is a ton of artistry that's already done for you, right? A lot of exploring the aesthetic space, a lot of, just like actually putting the art together, finding the assets. That's done. So it's great to just be able to just jump into something and have a really easy, accessible way of doing this sort of identity and sense of self hacking. I didn't actually make this avatar. This was a public avatar I found that has since been taken down just because of the general rot that happens to avatars.
Sure.
But I once it went down, I kind of freaked out. I had the world saved where I got it, and I went back and I found the author's contact information. I bought it off him.
Oh, perfect.
And so since then, I have been hacking it a little bit, mostly optimizing, because I'm sure you know the VRChat avatars are mostly made by amateurs, and so optimization is not something that they're just sort of experienced with.
I like how you brought up though the fact that it was a public avatar, because I think one of the best parts of VRChat, when I first started at least, you have this wide range of avatars everywhere, but they are art, like you brought up. And unlike other art where maybe you just pick the skin for a game and move on, because you now embody that avatar, I find myself the second I'm in it, straight to the mirror, straight to looking at the hands, straight to looking at the clothes. Like, for an artist, that's perfect. I'm actually now I don't just value your skin, I value this artwork. It's now me. Do I feel like it's me? If I wiggle my fingers, does it move in a way that I feel is natural, or is it my lips moving? Like, you really appreciate the art these VRChat artists are doing, and that goes kind of understated, and they probably need a better way to sell their art. But either way, that's a different subject. But
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're describing is the body ownership integration process, right? Our brain has body maps that it uses for basically everything. And when I say a body map, I kind of mean like a tiny little simulation or a mathematical model that describes a whole body or a part of a body and what state that it's in. And it uses these for everything. Everything from planning how you're going to pick up something on the countertop to like, how you're moving through the world, what you look like, what parts of your body count as you, what counts as flesh, what counts as clothes. And the crazy thing is that these body maps are usually very flexible, right? Because there's one of my favorite quotes I read on Twitter is somebody goes, "How come your brain can update its map of a body at runtime?" And then somebody replied, "Because your body can lose limbs at runtime."
Okay. For a second there, I didn't know where you were going with that, but now I get you. That kind of goes. I know this is a big segue, but into that first article that I read of yours, the embodying XR and the cognition, because I feel like that all kind of goes along with this. Um, I don't want to be contrarian, and I told you that, but I have a lot of philosophical questions for you on that, because there was a lot of things that I was trying to understand, and like I said, I wasn't disagreeing with anything, but there's like this goal alignment issue of I fully believe everything you believe. Like, my God, man, the rabbit hole you're going down, I want that so bad, but I have all these things that in the process, how do I rationalize my brain to accept that? And it kind of started when you were bringing up, improving comprehension in VR, things like that. And I'll let you set the stage for the audience, but real quickly, I watched a stovetop video that was on your article on how it's not just putting a frying pan on the stove. You can look at every little bit of the components, where the heat's coming from, where the heat starts in the pan, and using that for cognition and understanding better. And I'll let you get on that. I'm going to let you talk about that a little more before I get to my questions, because I think maybe I set the stage incorrectly for that. You may want to elaborate on it.
Oh, that sounds about right. That's actually one of the reasons I got into VR, right? Like my whole personal journey as a person who uses technology in this way, that my relationship with technology sort of culminates in that. I realized in the early days when I got my Oculus Rift DK2 and my Leap Motion that the common idea that this VR technology is for transporting you to a new place is very limited. I really don't like use case thinking. When somebody shows me a new piece of technology, I almost never go, what's it for? I ask myself, what can it do? Right? Because if I look at the capabilities first, I can come up with my own use cases, and so can the end customers. Now, it's not common to think like this,
No,
but
not at all.
but it's very empowering because then it gives you a lot of flexibility, right? You can do a lot more things with your life once you start looking at the things in your world in terms of what they let you do instead of like what they were quote unquote designed for.
Are what you saying, just out of curiosity, is that more or less related to if we set this up with that in mind, are we helping the end user get to that flow state of peak immersion almost a little easier?
Um, hmm. I think it depends on the individual user. Like that's such a there are so many contexts that question could be true in that I'm not really sure um where to go with that one.
That's fair.
But I I,
It's a
I
little
can bring
broad.
it. No worries. I mean, I can bring it back to kind of where we were going with this, though, was that I got my hands on an Oculus Rift DK2 and Elite Motion. And that combination at first lets you get photons into a user's eyes. And it lets, with the hand tracking, they can manipulate objects in the world. But the really cool thing about it is it has a stereo near infrared cameras on the front and an infrared emitter. You put it in pass-through mode, and all of a sudden you realize you have a primitive, cheap form of night vision. Really cheap. I paid $350 for that headset and $90 for the camera. There were actually times when I caught myself. So, like, sometimes I would be working late at night, and my wife would be asleep next to me on the bed. And I didn't want to wake her up, but I had to get out of my desk and like climb over all this weird crap in my room. So I put the headset on and I turned on the pass-through mode, and now I have night vision because I have this VR technology.
That's
So
hilarious.
exactly. And so that's sort of the thing where, like, when you're talking about the stovetop, what I'm trying to get people to realize is that the more sensors you put on a body, what we're building with this VR and AR technology is they're not just gadgets for fun. They're not toys. They are sensory organs, right? Like they're new senses and mini brains that we can integrate into ourselves because that's how close they are to us.
Yeah. That's I wish more people would be thinking about it like that when it comes to educating them and getting them to buy into that view. I know, just like you brought up in the article, you have the intrinsic and extrinsic ways of maybe motivating them there. And I don't really want to get into the extrinsic because I think most people understand what those are. They're the incentives.
Yeah.
But how do developers or the people making this possible where you just found a use case for it that maybe wasn't even designed, how do other people get to that same mindset intrinsically when you can't as a developer choose what that value is for them? Intrinsically they need to have it themselves. You just have to provide the means for them to find it, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, this is sort of like the same marketing problem we have with VR in general at this point. And it has like sort of this, I'm sure you've heard the quote from The Matrix, no one can be told what the Matrix is. They have to see it for themselves.
Yes.
Um, and so, like, one of the things I really want to see once the pandemic starts to wind down is people who really want to sell VR to the public. What they should do is they should do a massive boots on the ground advertising campaign, kind of like Rollerblades did in the 90s, where you just go city to city and you get thousands of people at each place in a headset with the best experience you can get them. It's about showing people. You evangelize and you show people. You don't push them, right? Because you can't force people to live life the way you want to live it.
Absolutely
But
not.
if you put enough work into showing people what you mean, you will eventually find the people that have the interests that you do.
I can think of many reasons why that hasn't happened yet pre-COVID. Where VR was pre-COVID, Oculus Quest 1 and 2, which is probably the easiest way to do this, what you're saying, boots on the ground, wasn't even a thing. Before COVID, though, putting aside the hardware limitations, what's your opinion on why we weren't doing that to start with? Why, when the Quest 1 launched, which was pre-COVID, were the boots on the ground not really there at all? Was it just too soon?
So, far from me to speak for any
Sure.
other professionals in the industry, right? I don't want to go around saying what Facebook was thinking because I don't work there. I don't know them. I don't really even talk to them. But I do think there are some reasons that are possible candidates. The big one is that been a long time since people have really marketed physical goods that way. Like you'll notice the campaign that I thought of occurred in the 1990s. Um, Digital advertising is so much easier and more effective in many cases, especially if you're advertising a website or an app or whatever. It's very easy to do that digitally. So I think that a big one would be that that's just kind of not how marketing is done anymore. And then the other one is that it is a very logistics and effort intensive way of marketing things. There are some things you can only market this way. And I think people are going to have to learn that VR might be one of those things. But yeah, it's a lot of work to do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just when I was going around trying to show people VR, just getting them to agree to speak with me about VR was a hassle. I didn't even give them a headset yet. Just, hey, give me 10 minutes of your time on a phone call. 8 minutes of it, I'll be talking about you and learning about you. And 2 minutes of it, I'll be asking you to see if you want to just try it. And even that was difficult enough, which is a shame because it is such an amazing opportunity to broaden the possible world that you live in, where eventually this might be all the world that you're living in. And it's a shame that people are so skeptical of it. And skeptical might be the wrong word. That is the wrong word. They're just, it's new, it's different, and it takes time to learn and want to be part of it. But that was something I took a lot from your first article too. And one thing I always think about too, though, is there's a lot of friction points. You know, we use the word friction in VR. I think there's a lot of friction just in real life of time management. Everything is so fast paced. It's wham bam, thank you, ma'am, on to the next. How do we get people to slow down and enjoy what AR, XR, VR can do, where it's not just gaming? How can we show them the value in the small things, like being able for the data points you talk about, where natural world, being able to learn things that you wouldn't normally do with data points on the screen, but that's going to take people slowing down. You know, how do we get them to do that?
Well, I mean, people do still take time off for themselves in their lives. We do live in a very hectic world. But I mean, I still see an escalation of interests. Now I know I'm narrowing this back down into the VR scope, so it's not necessarily what you're talking about. But so I'm out of the developer community. I am one of the people that I know of in my circle of friends that spends the most time in VRChat or in VR and specifically VRChat as a user, because a lot of them are too busy heads down trying to actually ship their game, which, I mean, you know, you got to do that if you want to survive. I'm very fortunate to be able to put aside a lot of my time to live in VR. But what I see is I see a lot, like an escalation. Somebody will show up in VRChat while I'm hanging out, drinking with buddies, whatever. Somebody will join us and they're a desktop user, right? And just hanging out with us in VR as a desktop user, they can see, if they watch long enough, they can see, right? We're moving our bodies, we're moving around, we make eye contact, blah, blah, blah. They're like, oh, that's a little bit more powerful than what I'm doing. And then that person will come in, they'll be like, yo, I got my Quest, it's awesome, it's awesome. And then great, awesome. And then they'll see that we're using full body tracking, right? And then they're like, that looks really cool, I want to get full body tracking. And then half a year later, because it took them that long to save up, and people do save up, I will mention, then they're like, oh, I got full body tracking, it's awesome. And then we all sit down and we get sad and grumpy and complain that like eye tracking and lip tracking and everything isn't like, so for a lot of this stuff, it's really, you can kind of do it incidentally. I think the big thing is getting somebody inside a headset, and then in the first few conversations you have while you're there, you kind of like prime them for the idea that like this is a really deep rabbit hole that you can explore a lot, and no pressure, but like, you know, don't forget that there's a lot more here. I don't know. I just think like gently reminding people, being open about it, and not pushing them too hard.
It's
does
almost,
most of it.
it almost sounds like what you're or not what you're advising, but what you're thinking, what I'm thinking from what you're saying is that it's not about getting people to buy in to the extremes, not about buying into the far future, about buying into what they have now that they're already interested in their normal life, but maybe this is the adjacent version. So it's no different than why I personally like Star Wars for VR. I don't think the games were particularly my thing, what I was looking for, but I appreciated being able to enjoy a property that I really have grown up with. And now, if I wasn't into VR, maybe that would push me over because I know what that is. I feel comfortable. It's safe and it's inviting. And now this thing that's a little scary that I don't really know much about, I can't try it before I buy it. Well, now I at least can be edged in with something I feel very comfortable with. And that's kind of what you alluded to with VRChat in a way. These people see you, they're already enjoying VRChat, and they're maybe enjoying your company. And then they see you wave and the fingers move and they're intrigued. And this is just another way they can enjoy what they already love, a little bit of a deeper way. I think that's pretty powerful. That's what I enjoy. Um, can I ask you a question though?
Certainly.
I was a little scared, not scared, but I'm a little concerned with two things that I was reading today. One is the philosopher's debugger. Can you elaborate on that? Because I don't know if I fully understood it, but I'm a little concerned that it almost seems like we're guiding conversation in a way, but I may have read that completely wrong. And I wonder if for the chat you can
Okay.
elaborate on that.
Certainly. All right. So the idea I outlined in the article called the philosopher's debugger, it comes from having many deep conversations with people and getting a bit frustrated at the inherent human limitations inside of them, right? Like somebody will make an assertion. Well, first somebody will make, somebody will make an assertion. And then they'll provide like several arguments for it and some evidence and stuff. And somebody will like reply to one of the first pieces of evidence, right? But then as they start spiraling down that first piece of evidence, they start forgetting the overall structure of the discussion they were having, right? Because that's just sort of how people are. And like me specifically, I have some problems with my attention span. And so it's really more of a, did so-and-so actually say that when they were talking about that, right? Or have we compressed parts of this conversation down into new labels that are losing information?
Sure.
So it's mostly, it's kind of like that. And you can also be like, all right, so one cool thing is if the system could automatically tag straw man arguments, red herrings, appeals to emotion, appeals to nature, blah, 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 all that stuff, so that it like lets the interlocutors focus on their conversation and on like validating information and really making sure they're getting truth in their heads. That was sort of the idea behind that one.
Is like I do, you're not wrong. A lot of times, especially if you're in a social format where characters are condensed, where you cannot elaborate, that's going to go awry very quickly. But my worry is that does that change what the conversation would have been without it? And I'm not saying maybe it sounds like if we're having a normal argument and we miss those points, that it's construed as negative, where this new debugger fixes that negative. But is that negative really just part of normal conversation where maybe we're learning just by those mistakes? And I'm not saying you're wrong. This is stuff that I was thinking about as I'm reading. I think that may happen. I think that really will. And it makes me a little nervous that that's going to change the flow of conversation on how we communicate.
It's not made for casual conversations.
Okay.
It's made for people who are currently in the mode of being very obsessed with this idea of truth, right? You're sitting down, actually kind of like the debates, the debates you have on stream, that would be something you would use the philosopher's debugger for. You would not use it for what we're doing right now, right?
And that would help me greatly. Absolutely. I would be all for that. Yeah. I mean, I guess in that sense, I guess it is the format. My concern would be we take that same debugger and people start applying it to a Twitter conversation, and that's just going to go poorly very quickly.
I mean, you put a Twitter conversation into anything, and it's going to go poorly. You know what they say: garbage in, garbage out.
You know what? I'm gonna push back on that. Why does everyone hate Twitter? My Twitter feed, there's some jerks, but they're few and far between. And some points go awry because people want to make a point in one tweet instead of doing a tweet chain. But I don't know. It's generally, I find my Twitter very encouraging and very insightful, and I learn a lot from mine. Granted, I also make a lot of mistakes and stupid fucking tweets, but
I mean, but I wasn't actually being serious. There was sort of that Twitter deprecating humor. No, you're right. And the thing important to remember with those is sort of the rule of social media. Not only does it train you, you train it. The algorithm is in part of a feedback loop with you. So if you don't like your social media experience, for now, there are still some knobs you can turn to get the experience to be better. You can mute people, block people, follow people, unfollow people, whatever it is. You can tune the experience a little bit.
Do you think VR is ever going to go that way, where it starts being curated a little bit more unbeknownst maybe to us, depending on how we play. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it depends on the spaces, right? There will be spaces where that's sort of explicitly said from the get-go, and then there are places where people find out that it was happening later and they feel angry and tricked. Then there'll be some places they don't do it at all. I do think one of the big issues we're going to have with VR spaces, and really any digital space in general, is that spaces are not necessarily signposted very well, right?
sure.
If you stumble into a digital space that some of your friends were in, and you are expecting the etiquette of a library and they're treating it like a bar, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, that is true. But you do have options to mitigate that in VR that you don't have in real life. You can block them immediately, kick them from the world without any police. So at least you do have options in that sense to curate it yourself. But then the game itself could curate it for you. I'm open personally to maybe some type of game or social experience that is more curated. Have you experienced Facebook Horizon at all? I'm not sure if you're in there.
No, in fact, my Quest, I don't really even use my Quest or my Quest 2. I don't have an original Quest. I have a Quest 2, and I don't use it except for testing code.
Hmm.
And then I'll give it to my wife and she'll use Airlink to join us in VRChat. I'm not an Oculus person. I don't really do Oculus stuff.
I'm a,
It's just,
is that
oh,
the anti-Facebook stance? I'm not. You don't have to get into that, but just curious.
not anti, just non. I don't mind that Facebook exists. I don't think there's anything inherently immoral about what I think Zuckerberg is trying to build. I have this crazy notion in my head that Facebook in 20 years is like a corporate cyborg hive mind sovereign entity thing. And you know what? If somebody thinks that's worth slick VR tech, then they should sign up. But my interest in relation to that is, okay, cool. Not everybody's going to want to do that. How do we make other spaces, right?
Yes.
How do we make spaces for people who really want either things that are community driven or raw and unfiltered or like respect individuals? There's so many different things that Facebook as a company culture is never going to be able to make
Yes.
because it's
Agreed.
not in their DNA.
Hmm.
And so the metaverse, I hate that word, but like, okay, all of VR and AR should not just be Facebook. That would be a suboptimal outcome, if you ask me.
I don't think any. Well, yes, someone will disagree with you because it's the internet. I will not disagree with you, and I feel like most in the chat will not. I will give. There's one thing that Facebook does for VR right now that has me happy. I'll give them actually a plus here. And it's not about the games or all that. So the cost of a VR headset is something that I think about quite a bit, and I don't think about it in the sense of I just want everyone to have one, so the $300 Oculus Quest 2 is a great deal. I think of it more in the sense of your article on providing all this educational benefits, cognition benefits, everything. And if VR is expensive and you don't have a lot of choices, it's just, in my mind, a possibility that the intellectual gap between poorer households and richer households, it widens because this technology is going to be immensely helpful. And I know why Facebook can keep it so cheap. At least I have some assumptions. I don't know anything, but it's something of a concern. If I don't see another company come out with a cheaper headset, I have to almost root for Facebook in the accessibility camp because that information that they have with that headset or any device that's cheap is going to put them above someone else who can't have access to it.
Oh yeah, certainly. And yeah, making technology affordable, easily useful, available to, anybody who wants it. That is a very important thing. But the thing I kind of don't like about the Quest 2 being so cheap is that I'm pretty sure it is a subsidized headset. So we're distorting the market now. And so
Yes.
one of the reasons you may not be getting cheaper competitors is because the competitors can't compete the way they normally would, right? Because there's a process where normally you exploit economies of scale to get things to be affordable to everybody. And it takes some time and it doesn't happen right away and all that stuff. But normally market dynamics work out and technology gets cheaper in the long run. As long as, the demand for it is not inelastic. As long as there's elastic demand, the price will fall. So I almost worry that by trying to go too cheap, too fast, it may harm the overall industry. But of course, actually quantifying that would be an exercise in econ that I'm certainly not equipped for.
No. I don't think no one's asking you to do that. I think you and I would both be spinning our wheels. I do like Damien's comment. VR is a human right. I might change the first word, and it encompasses a lot more to me. Information. I think access to information should be human right, because that's ultimately a big differentiator between a lot of people. But what's the option, JC? Like, who's the next one to challenge Facebook? Like, what? And you don't need to name a company, but what would somebody have to do to come in and be not a competitor? I don't like using that word, because when I hear a competitor, it just means them versus us.
Yep.
But I just want not a competitor. I want another great option who cares about virtual reality, who sees the vision. I don't want to use the word competitor. I think the more we use it, the more we just make camps. What's an option for the consumer? Do you always? I know there's no option right now, but do you see one coming in the next 5 years?
There may be some. The first thing I would actually have to kind of question you about, though, is your framing. What do you mean by a human right?
For the information?
Yeah, are you using positive rights or negative rights? Because they're different models.
I'm going to ask you to explain that one. That might I might be a little lost on that question.
All right, so positive rights are things that society must provide for you, right? They're considered entitlements, right? A positive right is an entitlement. If you exist, you must have or be given this. A negative right is something that you sort of come to the table with, not quite by nature, but like by virtue of existing, right? I have 2 legs. I can walk around. I have freedom of movement. I have a voice. I can speak. I have freedom of speech. I'm alive by being born. I have a right to life. Negative rights, it's an infringement when somebody deprives you of that right. And there is a critical difference in those two, because positive rights require somebody else to work so that you can have it. Which is why there is this distinction and many disagreements over which model is correct. I won't speak as to which one I believe is correct, because that's the kind of issue that can cause comment sections to go down in flames, but you should think about that.
Yeah, you put me on the spot with that question. If I had to give an on-the-spot answer that's mildly not thought out, I believe not VR, but the access to information, mainly the internet, would be the right. If I had to put it on negative or positive, it probably should be negative. However, it is always going to require somebody to work for it. So should it be negative? Probably, in my mind. But yeah, it's going to be a positive right in my mind.
Very curious.
But
all right. So anyways, back to the original question. Sorry,
yes.
That was a very interesting tangent and I wanted to go down it.
That's what this is for.
There may be some people bringing headsets to the market soon. I don't think actual competition, or not competition, something comparable to price, performance, and power to Facebook is going to come without some kind of compromise, right? Like, do you care about supply chains? Do you care about where it's made? Do you care about whether the labor involved was slave labor or not? Do you care if the country it was manufactured in is trying to attack and subvert yours? Because if so, there are a whole bunch of cheap headsets coming your way, right?
Yep.
But it's like, do you want it to be American made? Do you want it to be made in an allied country? Do you what do you want out of the production? Because like all of these things have costs associated with them, and so I don't know. I think some people because I swear to gosh, I've had so many people say we need cheaper headsets that are not made by Facebook, and it needs to happen right now. And like, if everybody who ever said that, sat down and worked on building a headset, we'd have it by now.
I think if anyone who said that worked on anything, I mean, let's just be honest. Everything takes so much more than you expect. A simple lollipop that you buy from a convenience store, it wasn't just some Joe in a room who made a lollipop. There's a lot that went into that. A lot of different companies. There's not even one company who dealt with it. So I'm with you fully. I just don't. I'm not a pessimist at heart. I never will be. But I still have problems rationalizing in my head what headset could come at a cost-effective point that wouldn't come with some type of con that would probably be on a spectrum unethical to somebody. You know what I mean?
It might be a while. I actually think that trying to attack it from that angle is the wrong angle to attack the problem from. I actually think people who really care about VR right now should focus on the customers that are already here, the really engaged enthusiast people, because a lot of them,
Wow.
and this is becoming less true these days, right? It was more true in 2017 than it is now.
Yeah, I would really
But
like to hear where you're going with this because I'm with you. I feel like, but I know. Yeah, I'm gonna let you finish there.
a lot of professionals in this industry, investors, developers, whoever, they have been ignoring real customers who exist today for the prospect of a hypothetical huge future install base that may never arrive.
Yes.
Right? And so if somebody really wants to sort of push the future of VR in the best way they think is possible, what they should do is they should focus on very, very small interventions that lean on design, because design is cheap. It's compared to production. Right? Focus on very small products for the existing community that are easy to produce and get most of their value from design, and think long term, right? Come up with a whole bunch of small little product ideas, let each one grow further or grow one after the other. And most importantly, what I think somebody who wants to work in VR should do is spend time directly, deeply embedded in the community, like right up to their eyeballs, to get a sense for what customers want and for what they are interested in, what things they'll respond to well. Because it seems to me like a lot of efforts are just trying to import old game industry knowledge, things from flat
Yes.
2D gaming, and like, okay, we're going to build this, right? And this is understandable. Then they all get so wrapped up in development that they never actually figure out if there's product market fit. They're never actually making sure they're serving a real customer, or they have all these charts. And again, this was way more common in like 2016 and 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, oh, well, I have this hockey stick graph that says there's going to be 1 billion users in VR by 2024, right? That's obviously not going to happen. But like, so much of the initial hype was predicated on that. And so, I don't know, I think just really focusing on the existing community and what can be done for them inexpensively and focused on the long term is the right play here.
When you
Um,
say current community, is there a heavy allusion here to PCVR? I gotta ask.
uh, Subconsciously, maybe.
Yes. Okay.
Um,
I had to
uh,
ask that.
yeah, maybe. It's
What would
entirely possible. That's what I was thinking. I don't know.
if on your short list? I don't need, you don't need to give me the perfect game experience, something, but your short list. If developers were as good all the time, or sorry, not developers, if the outreach and the focus of knowing what the current enthusiast market wanted was as strong 24/7 as HTC tried their meme game, what would be on JC's like short list of, hey, this attention to detail right here is needed right now for who you have and where you want to go?
All right. Yeah. So I really think the big thing is to focus on design, design, right? Production is extremely expensive. If you have any artists or developers on your team, it's going to be a huge cost sink to keep them there, right? And I know a lot of gamers are starting to say, well, we want long form story experiences and we want better graphics and all that stuff. And yes, you, like as consumers, you do deserve those things,
Sure.
but they're very economically difficult to build right now. So I think using science about what we know about the body, about what we know feels good, about what we know is fun, focus very much on the game feel, interactions, feedback, tight gameplay loops. If you do want to go look at old games, getting inspiration, arcade games from way back in the day are
Sure.
great for this, right? Because they were designed to just sort of like keep you engaged, get you a lot of fun really intensely. And especially with these headsets not being wearable, most of them not being wearable for more than 4 hours, there's no point to making like a 40 or 60 hour epic in
Yes,
VR right
yes.
now.
I could not agree with you more on that. It is why some of the games that I still to this day play the most are probably the older games. Jet Island, I have entered my flow state the most I've ever done in those games. First a lot, and that's what I that's let me bring it back here. Hold on. My short list. All I want is to find a game that I enter that flow state quicker and quicker, where it doesn't really matter anymore what I'm doing. I am now just in that game. Jet Island was one of those games for me where, yeah, I had to learn the controls and how to maneuver and maintain position with the board and speed. once I did, there's points where I completely forgot, 100% forgot that have an objective. I had no objective other than I just want to get to the top of that mountain, and I'll do whatever I need to do to get there, and completely lost myself into the point where, thank God I had a table behind me because I would have fallen backwards if I didn't, and caught myself. I am now just doing only VR because that's where my brain is at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you asked me to design my perfect game, and of course, to break out of the scope a little bit, I'm going to assume I have an unlimited budget, but I'm not going to spend it on typically high budget items. Just going to use it to extend the runway as far as possible, because runway is everything. I would say I would want a video game that has some of the core gameplay elements of Sirento, the cutting mechanics from Katana X, the throwing mechanics from Budget Cuts, and the ability to like import a VRM avatar. Right.
Okay.
And then like a lot better level and encounter design, right? You put all those things together, you do a lot of rapid prototyping, you focused almost entirely on design. I think you'll have a killer VR game on your hands.
I do like that. That does sound really, really good. Except for, I'll be honest, man, I never could figure something about budget cuts and throwing. I was always having problems with, but that's probably me because I was using the Vive wands at the time, and throwing on those was anything but easy. So yeah, any Vive Pro 2 owners in the chat, have fun throwing with those Vive wands. I do love them though. I do love them. I'm not trying to throw too much shade at those. Yeah. By the way, some in the chat, I want to get to the transhumanism thing next, but some in the chat they're bringing up, have you dabbled any bit into like NFT, not NFTs, but like blockchain, virtual land? I was talking quickly with a few people on that, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on if you've dabbled in that at all.
A little bit. The concepts are very intriguing to me, especially like cryptocurrency providing sound currency that can't be debased or inflated away. It is more or less borderless. I hear a lot of stories about people who are in nations that are not necessarily very economically sound or politically sound. And for them, having the ability to get capital, have it be secure, the government would struggle to seize it, and the government certainly can't inflate it away. That's something that I don't think people in richer countries really appreciate very much. So, like, a lot of suffering is being reduced right now because of that. And yeah, I know somebody's inevitably going to bring up the ecological cost, but really you should take that up with the power plant operators for not switching to nuclear like 30 years ago. So
I'm not a big fan of that conversation. Well, not what you brought. I'm not a big fan of the conversation about that side of it because it's just downplaying the benefits. They're just negating everything possibly positive for the little bit negative. But to jump kind of back into the topic, I don't know if you saw it. I just saw it right before you and I started talking and streaming tonight. But I noticed Rec Room now has the ability to sell your in-game currency for real-life currency. And I was actually a little surprised that just happened. I don't know how the logistics of it work. But they basically just made a small creator economy inside their game, which good. Really, I'm really happy for Rec Room. That's the first, I think, mainstream VR game that now has an in-game economy with real life implications, to my knowledge.
absolutely. Although I wouldn't say I'm terribly surprised when I hear that. Actually, my first question before I decide to get surprised or not is what's the exchange rate? Because because if the exchange rate is not very favorable to the virtual currency, which in an initial virtual economy, you would expect it to not be very favorable compared to a real one with real commodities and real services and all that. Well, no, the virtual services are still real, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
So I'm very happy about it, but like I'll decide to be surprised or not when I hear what the exchange rate is. But no, that's fantastic news, right? Because then Rec Room and similar creative toolkits, social platforms like Roblox are where a lot of very young people like to hang out, and young people are very ambitious.
Yes.
This is a chance to get them to have practice with entrepreneurial, artistic, and creative exercises, which I think one of the reasons we have so many people who are bitter and jaded when it comes to businesses, money, transactions, having to work for a living, things like that, is because they were not necessarily given the opportunity to experience the benefits when they were young and at their most creative, right?
Yes.
It's very, I mean, I understand. I used to be a very almost anti-capitalist person because I was young and homeless and no one would hire me. And then I started, I don't know, I was still very ambitious, and I wound up turning that ambition into building things getting contracts, working with other people, cooperating with them, and then all of a sudden my life started turning around. So I really think people getting experience with building things for other people and coordinating and everybody sort of sharing in the value creation of that would be fantastic. That's great news.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate you bringing up that, yes, Rec Room does have, I don't have any stats in front of me, so I'm going to go off just intuition and what I've seen. Generally, a younger audience than other games. And I do like how they made a creator economy so far because as I'm 31 and I have more responsibilities than I would care to have right now. And I noticed that, yes, I have now the ability to recover from a risk that goes awry better as an adult. However, I have less opportunity and chances to take that risk because if they go terribly bad, I have much more at stake. And I think younger people, I'm not going to say children because that gets a little dangerous, but younger people who are in the position to take risks, I'm happy that Rec Room's providing them a chance to possibly take a mitigated risk. If anything, it's more mitigated than any other risk, but it's inviting them to the understanding of risk a little earlier because they're in the better position to take it with way less consequences than somebody older. That's why I'm most excited to see these like virtual reality e-commerce opportunities because whether it works out or fails, it's inviting a younger generation to take risks that ultimately they're going to be better off taking now. That way, when they're in a position to take bigger risks later on, they understand that concept. But
yeah, absolutely. And you know what? You want to go back to the transhumanist topic? Let's
absolutely.
talk about how you got older and your ability to do all-nighters and jump out of bed fully refreshed. Where the hell did that go?
How dare you call me out? I sleep 5 hours a night. That is not an anecdote, and I hate myself for it. I feel terrible.
I mean, I'm only 1 year older than you, and I am also in this similar scenario. All right, so yeah, let's go back to talking about expanding and improving and revolutionizing the human condition because here's a really easy low hanging fruit that people are working on right now. Sadly, it doesn't have much crossover with VR, but the aging process. We are now starting to understand the aging process as a series of physical failures in a system, right? And that so like you age not because the calendar or the clock ticks down, right? It's not because you're like technically older in time. It's because the metabolic processes in your body have begun to accumulate little errors because they don't always work out perfectly every time. And this starts to build up over time. And your body has many systems for fixing these, right? It's a buildup of damage. Your body is getting more and more and more damaged as you get older. You can mitigate it a little bit with diet and exercise. Those are currently the most powerful levers most people have. But if you can remove all of the damage in a person's body, they become younger.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we are getting closer to understanding and classifying all of these different kinds of damage. There's genetic damage, there's intracellular junk, extracellular junk. There's oxidative stress causing damage, all of these things, right? And so once you know what all of these are, you can start designing interventions for each of them. And so if you did want to go back to being a spry 19-year-old that can get out of bed in the morning, just pop right out and then go spend almost all day working without sleeping, the way to do this, the way to make this happen is to repair aging, broken bodies.
How far?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, how far on this topic are you, JC, willing to go to get there? You know, what's the limit for you?
That's the beautiful thing about transhumanism versus the idea or the intellectual framework that it builds on top of, right? Old school humanism is an enlightenment philosophy that more or less means, people can be good without God, sort of like liberal-ish, democratic-ish societies work the best. And so like, we want to do the best we can in that framework. But a lot of people in that framework inherit a lot of these really weird edge cases, right? They're like, okay, I like life. I like being alive, but I don't want to be alive for too long. I might get bored at 1,000 years old, or I'm not sure I want to live that long. And what if the future is weird and crazy and unpredictable and I get future shock? And it's like, listen, if life is good, right? Like I like to use the example of you go find somebody on the train tracks. You find a 9-year-old trapped on the train tracks and there's a coming train. You save the 9-year-old, awesome, right? No problem. There's a 99-year-old on the train tracks. You don't leave that person there because they're old, right? You pick them up off the train tracks.
Yes.
So in this example, the oncoming train is the aging process.
Wow.
There's no reason. So basically the idea behind transhumanism is you get rid of all the little weird edge cases and you just simplify humanist ethics by getting rid of those sort of weird little edge cases. Like another good one would be intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. Intelligence of all stripes, whether you believe general intelligence exists or not, or whether it's just a bunch of little specific intelligences, intelligence is good, right? The more you have it, the better you are capable at taking care of yourself, and the better you can take care of others, assuming you value other human beings, which most of us do.
Yes. I would hope so.
That seems like a good moral framework. I personally think you should value other people.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, some people go, okay, well, how far is too far? And it's like, does this good thing suddenly stop being good because you had to put electrodes in your brain and wear a computer to get more of it? Yes. Why would it be, right? Like, is this sort of body purity, this ick response to putting things inside of our bodies, is it really rational? Or is it like a heuristic instinct response that people have built up, possibly through evolution, for a context that no longer really applies?
Is it just that no one wants to be the first to take that leap? Because to me, it just seems like, let's put it onto the VR side. The second BCIs start becoming to the consumer grade, to a degree, enthusiast grade, I'll say that, and the first couple people start taking that dive, I've got to imagine there's a snowball effect after that. Just no one wants to be the first down this rabbit hole. But I think many people will go down it once others do.
I'm not so certain that's the problem.
No?
It may be a factor, but it's not the problem. The problem is kind of related to, it's related to our society's general level of risk aversion. And the big thing is, I think in the US at least, we have a regulatory framework and a legal framework that is extremely risk averse. Everybody is basically it's an ethical principle called the precautionary principle. It's like, you're not allowed to do anything until you can prove it safe. Right?
Okay. Yes. I can see that.
You see this with nuclear power. You see this with medical technology. Everything is structured so that you have to go through all these barriers to conclusively prove that your idea will work, and it creates a stifling environment for innovation, right? The counter argument to the precautionary principle is the proactionary principle. You're like, we should be risk takers, right? If somebody is okay taking a risk, we shouldn't stop them. Right? Like, informed consent is great, but like, people can also understand when they're taking a risk that they don't understand, right?
Yes.
That's something people are capable of understanding. And the big thing is, everybody just wants to avoid responsibility. The legal framework is all around making sure that an angry mob can't point the finger at somebody and go, you are the reason I got hurt, even though I was experimenting with myself. Like, you can look at the FDA. There was a series of amendments right after the thalidomide incident where the FDA's procedures for approving medicine were amended drastically. And so before, it used to be, I think you would submit your medical intervention to the FDA, and if they didn't get back to you in 6 months, it was automatically approved.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
That's the way it used to be. Now, somebody has to sign off on it first. Somebody's signature has to be on that before it's allowed to go anywhere near the market. And there were a bunch of other things that happened as well. And the cost and time of getting a new intervention to market spiked, right? We went from getting things on the market from like 4 years to getting things on the market to about 15 years, right?
Yes.
And so I'm sure you're an American, right?
I am.
You know how wonderful the cost situation is with healthcare in our country right now. And
so wonderful that I have to make the conscious choice when to go get checked out, which is very rarely.
Yeah, you and me both. And a lot of this comes from the fact that getting through the FDA approval process is a nightmare, right? Like, we got super fortunate when the COVID vaccines were approved, those vaccines were designed in under a week, I'll let you know. That there was a fast track approval process, emergency use authorizations, and the process was kind of sped up. They actually spent most of the time on the statistical checking and like making sure that like it was safe and effective and all that stuff. But the vaccines were designed in under a week because our biotech has kind of advanced so much that if you know exactly what you want to program the body to produce using mRNA, you can just program it to do so. And it's like, oh, we'll build a spike protein so that the immune system can recognize this virus and respond to it appropriately. Super fast to do that. In fact, if there had been very little or no regulatory framework, you probably could have purchased a vaccine. I'm assuming like a totally libertarian medical industry. You could have purchased a vaccine in like, oh gosh, what was it? Sometime in like summer 2020.
Yeah, but because the urgency, the risk factor was put to the side, and that's why we are where we are now.
Yep. And so I would say if you want to see more innovation in this space, or really in any space that involves augmenting a person, the first thing you want to do is find a way to let people who want to experiment, even if the experiments are dangerous, give them the freedom to do so. Entertain the proactionary principle instead of the precautionary principle. Give people their freedom back, right?
Yes. I could not agree with you more on that.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying before the stream, I wasn't sure where we were going to go with the conversation, but I was thinking, just as I was eating dinner, say I was given the opportunity to make that informed choice, where I make the choice to augment something. And in my mind, the first thing I went to augmenting was life, just longevity, my time. Because that's my number one thing every day that I struggle with the most is my time. Today, borderline was having a panic attack because I just ran out of time to do what I needed to do. But then I gave the thought, what am I okay with? Immortality? Right now, no, I'm not. Dying, it's a little more morbid, but dying sounds appropriate. But I do want to live longer, and I'm thinking, well, what if a BCI could help me not need this sleep anymore, or something, some augment that I'm down with. That's a huge amount of life back. That's reasonable. That's my first stepping stone. I'd make the informed consent easily. If someone said, "Hey, you could not sleep anymore, and your body would adjust," done. I will take the risk because that to me is so empowering to get that much life back. I'm okay with that. But like you've been bringing up, I'm interested to see. Let's say we are proactive in it and allowing people to make the choice. Let's bring it into the XR space. Who's willing to take that first risk, and what would it be? I'm not sure. You, right there, you.
Me, absolutely. There are a couple things I'd be willing to try right now. Let's see. Nerve stimulation would be a good one. All right, like galvanic vestibular stimulation to combat motion sickness. You could put some of those electrodes on me while I play a driving game. I'll lean around and do all that stuff. There's a certain point in when the BCIs get a little bit better. There's really only one thing I'm waiting for them to improve upon before I go full in on BCIs, and that is the surgical process. I don't want a human cutting my brain open and putting electrodes in me. The humans are too clumsy. They're too slow. Like, not to dunk on human surgeons, what they accomplish as a human is miraculous, right? But if anybody's cutting my head open and putting electrodes in, that thing better be a robot, because I am not messing around.
I feel you on that. What would the who's the first one bringing a BCI? Is it going to be Elon? Is Neurolink going to be the first one?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean, because there are people with BCIs already.
Yes.
And the thing is, a lot of them are currently in research mode. I do think Neuralink has a decent chance at... So the big thing with invasive BCIs, at least, ones that go in your body, is the user experience needs to be improved drastically, right? Like, you want it to be like an outpatient surgery. You want to just kind of go to sleep, wake up, no pain. It's in there. There's a little titanium patch over your skull, and then the hair will grow in over it, and your skin goes over it, and all that fun stuff. But but you don't want it to be like, you don't want to remove a huge portion of the cranium unless like you find a way to make the surgical environment like a literal clean room, which doesn't normally happen in surgical environments. So yeah, it's all about improving the user experience, making it painless, fast, easy, no side effects. And I think Neuralink is closest to solving also the scarring issue, right? Like if you put a bunch of electrodes in somebody's head, like a Utah array is a little chip with a whole bunch of pins at the bottom, and they're rigid pins. And typically for research, they'll put it onto somebody's cortex and they'll push it in. And then for a few months, they'll get excellent signals off the subject's brain for usually the motor cortex. The motor cortex is the most well-studied part of the brain. But then with the Utah array, something starts to happen because the electrodes were inflexible, right? They were sharp, pointy, rigid. Scar tissue in the brain begins to form around them. And then all of a sudden, the quality of the signals you're getting go down and down and down until eventually, like a half a year or a year later, it's no longer a useful implant. And for something that goes in your brain, you want an upgrade cycle of like 10 years, not one.
I'd say at
right?
least, at least,
At least.
minimum.
Yeah, exactly. So I think solving the issue with electrodes that are soft, compliant with the tissue, robots that can identify blood vessels and navigate around them as they insert the electrodes, making sure the biocompatible coating around the electrodes is not corrosive and can withstand the environment of the body for long periods of time. I don't understand the market that well, but I do think Neuralink is probably the closest.
Have you tried now this is way lowbrow compared to that. Have you tried the NextMind, kind of like the external BCI dev kit that they were sending around for a little bit?
Is that the one that was on Thrill's channel with the little flashing lights on screen?
Yeah, he did make a video on it. I'm 99% sure, probably.
I think it's that one. I haven't used that one. I've used a different one, but I will tell you what I think I noticed in those videos, right?
Sure.
The little flashing light pattern that they draw in your vision whenever you want to interact with it, I think what they're doing is, so one of the problems with the BCI is figuring out exactly what the signals mean, right? All the little brain waves you get as they go into your head or as they come out of your head. It's like, well, what the hell is that? It just sounds like noise. But if you find a way to inject data into the brain that you already know the structure of, you can listen for that exact data. So what I think they're doing is I think they're using that structured flashing pattern of light, and then in the brain or the wearable electrodes in the back, they're looking for signals that are similar in structure to the image they sent into the VR headset. I think that's why that's there.
If I can find, I'll be honest, I was given one and tried it. It was fun. It definitely was a little wonky. If I can find the USB for it still for the connection, if you want to try it, I'll send it over to you so you can have some fun with it.
No, that's fine. I'm actually not at the point where I'm interested in messing with any new BCIs right now. I have the Lucid Link.
Oh, okay.
It was, the device out of South Korea. It's a pretty impressive piece of engineering. It does track some of the things they say it tracks.
For the people listening, can you give them a little idea of what that is so they know the context?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So it's this little, it's a device that you attach to a Vive Pro or a Vive or any of the other headset adapters I think they have. And it has a few dry electrodes on the front, and they get pushed against your forehead. It attaches to the head strap in the front. And so what they do is the electrodes get some electric signals that come off your skull, right? So basically, brainwaves are these little electrical signals that come out of your neurons. And one of the problems is that by the time they go through your skull, they're very diffuse. They're no longer these nice, clean waveforms. But yeah, so yeah, the headset, the little attachment Lucid Link for the Vive Pro headset that I have, it tries to get some data out of your head using these surface electrodes that go on your forehead. And it, like I said, it does roughly track the things it says it tracks. General attentional level. I mean, that's really, oh gosh, I forget all the other ones, but
Sure.
they're not super intimate or personal signals. They're very high level kind of abstract things. Are you focusing? How do you feel in a very vague sense? Things like that. And what I found was that the signal processing, I think, took too long. I had actually come up with some ideas for a game I wanted to design around such low resolution signals. Just being able to tell if somebody's focusing really hard on something is actually great for a user interface, because you can use hand tracking and eye tracking to navigate through the interface space, and then a spike in their attentional level to be like, oh, that's the thing they want for the actual picking action. No problem. But the signals I got from the device had so much latency that they were almost perfectly out of phase with what I was trying to do. I would like focus and I'd be like, okay, the ball's going to go up now because I focus. And then I notice it's not going up right away, right? And I'm like, all right, shit, well, I guess I should unfocus and try again. And then it goes up because the device got the old data from the signal saying I was focusing, and then it falls. And then I focus again and I get it to come up. And so like the ball just keeps flopping in place because, yeah, the device is perfectly out of phase with my intent.
Yes.
And I'm like, to fix this, I would have to learn calculus, machine learning, neural networks, and I would have to just put so much work into writing my own software and upgrading my skills so much that I'm like, I'm going to wait 2 generations. It's coming soon, but I'm not ready for it right now.
What's the stepping stone? I'm going to assume the first BCI stepping stone is going to be external.
Yep.
For a consumer, what's the use case of the first stepping stone? Is it TV control? Is it going to be gaming related? Is it going to be Netflix watching? Is it something minute like that? Or what can we expect for consumer in the next 5 years?
See, I kind of can't answer that because, like I said earlier, use case thinking, especially with really new technologies, is kind of a bad idea. It was like in the early days of VR when we're like, oh, here's this thing. It's for watching 360 videos. And it kind of wasn't. I mean, you can use it for that, but that was not what most people wound up using it for. So I actually think what we want to do is we want to get, at first, preferably a wearable device that most importantly gets good, consistent signals that are processed quickly, right? Because when you look at what a lot of the EEG headsets in medicine are doing, they're recording all the data and they're sending it to a computer. And they're also recording the environment around the subject. And then later they pour over the data with all the time in the world to try correlating what's in the signals, what happened in the experimental environment, and what do we learn from that? But if you have a VR headset on, VR headset is updating at 120 hertz. You don't have 2 seconds to figure out what the user wants the interface to do. You just don't have that much time. So I think, yeah, the big thing is getting BCIs that are faster, better response times, better signal analysis. I do have another BCI in the mail. I ordered it a long time ago. I ordered the Notion 2 and they upgraded me to a Crown, and I've heard that this one's a lot better. So I will experiment with that one. So when I said I'm not getting any more, I mean, I'm not buying any ones past this one.
Yes.
But I do think there are going to be eternal problems with wearable BCI that will hamper what you can do with it, right? Because people are kind of terrified of BCI. I'm not terrified of wearable BCI, at least not EEG headsets, because there are some serious limitations. The first one is registration, right? Whenever we're putting a BCI on somebody, they have what's called, oh gosh, it's been a while. I think it's like called the 1020 model, and there are like a series of points on the head that you want the electrodes to be in, and then you put the electrodes there on the head. But the thing is, those electrodes are measuring responses from so many different neurons that even just tiny little changes in how you wear the headset can render like an entire day of training with the device useless, right? Because right now, there's always an interpretation layer. Like a series of machine learning systems have to interpret the data as they come in because no two brains are the same. Right? Not even close. And so, yeah, like you can ruin a whole day's worth of sitting down with your BCI and training it to do what you want to do by taking the thing off,
yes,
getting a snack, and coming back in and putting it on. It sucks, but that's the case. So I would really not want anybody to be terrified of these EEG headsets that are probably going to come with VR headsets really soon.
Let me ask you this then, because I'm not familiar with BCIs much, but low Cody TV, he's curious, and I am too. Are there privacy concerns with BCIs? Is it transmitting data back, or is this mostly once it's implanted, um, localized? I really have no idea. I have no idea at all.
It depends on many factors. The first one, actually, the most important one, the one you should really use as your primary heuristic for deciding if a piece of technology is going to respect your privacy, is how much you trust the vendor. The vendor and the supply chain. The supply chain is important too, actually, because you can have a company made by the most driven, talented individuals who understand information security, and they have perfect moral alignment with you. If the headset is manufactured somewhere that is either hostile to you or just not trustworthy, somebody can sneak a hardware implant in there, and then it's game over. So yeah,
It's
the first
scary.
one is, but we've had this problem for a long time. Your routers, right? Routers have been intercepted all over the world and had hardware implants in them. And so really the classic trick that most people use for privacy now that works really well is a social network analysis. Who are you buying things from? Where are they coming? What's the chain of custody? After that, you would ask yourself, where is the processing done, right? If I have a BCI headset, implanted or not implanted, local compute is a lot safer than it being sent out to the cloud, right? Because what I can do is I can pie hole it if, no, not pie hole it. I can like air gap my BCI so that if it's all running on my head, but there is like a wireless transmitter on my Wi-Fi, I can shut that down and I can have rules on my firewall that don't allow anything from the headset to go out, right? So like, yeah, it's all about chain of custody and where the processing is being done. And ultimately, I guess it does come down to what data is collected, but then you have a paradox,
So,
right?
real quick before you go to the paradox, the chain of custody, is that, I'm assuming you're talking about very similar to, man, I'm going to missay it. That recent hack, I believe, with, man, what was it? That led to the whole gas hack and the government, somebody getting in. And what they did is that the program that the security company was using, they did not source where the code was being made.
Yep.
And due to that, they didn't know their supply chain, and that's how it got in, unbeknownst to them. I'm assuming that's kind of a tangent of what you're alluding to.
Exactly. It's about every piece in the system. Who has had access to it? Where has it been? Has its state been tracked through as much of its life cycle as possible? That counts for the device itself, it counts for the data processing, and it counts for the data collection. So like a lot of these security principles already exist. It's a matter of trying to apply them as best you can. And of course, there's the other old safety adage for people in general is the number one rule for being safe is don't be the most valuable target.
Yes. Yes,
Right?
yes, yes. I cannot agree with that more. I've seen more people in my industry, which is uh, a sliver of this conversation, a almost unnoticeable fathom. But yes, the people who are the most valuable targets tend to, in my industry, not secure themselves as much as they should. So I'm with you fully on that.
Yep. And there will be a spread of options that come in various security configurations. Um, there are a lot of people who in the BCI world who are talking about doing all their processing on device. One of the problems and one of the sort of unfortunate realities of the universe that is very difficult to extricate is that the more power you have at your hands, both financial, social, whatever, the easier it is for you to afford more work put into your security. Um, there are not a whole lot of good solutions for that, but it's also not a reason to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater because this whole improving technology and improving the human experience thing has kind of been going on since we first harnessed fire. So we're kind of inexorably on this road anyways. So I don't know. I don't think you can throw it out just because perfect security or perfect privacy are not attainable. Perfect price accessibility is not attainable. It doesn't mean you throw the whole exercise out. It means you just try putting more effort into seeing if you can utilize the mechanics available to you, social, market, engineering, and otherwise, to steer towards the best future you can.
Yes, and you are going to be a big asset in that future because I really appreciate you being the type to take chances. I hope your wife doesn't give you too much crap for taking those chances,
Oh,
but
absolutely not.
but it's people like you who are going to be the first early adopters of a lot of things that are going to make it possible for me to feel a little more secure when 20 years when my child's using this stuff, then I feel more secure that the path is paved the right way. Just with time, we still have time for a few more topics, but I always like to end it uh, kind of a thought process is any topics that you feel near and dear to your heart that we haven't hit. Is there anything that you'd like to bring up that we can riff off for a few minutes before we end this? I know you
That's a
sent me a
good
few
one.
top. I know you sent me a few topics. I want to make sure because this is. Let me get back to me here. This is a good chance to give you a platform. Not that you need it. I don't mean that derogatory, but I think there's a lot of times where streams are ended prematurely, where maybe there's one topic that the person's super interested that we didn't get to. I at least like to get that out there so we can hit that if we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's see the first one. A friend of mine actually asked for me to plug her Discord because she does research with all sorts of things like
Oh yeah, go ahead.
a Phantom Sense and all that. Actually, is Allison in the chat?
Here, go ahead. You tell me what it is. I'll put the text up on the screen.
Hang on. I'm just gonna go get her Twitter account or something. Where's the?
I think the chat should be able to see this, I believe.
Actually, I have admin privileges. I think I'll just
Thank you, everyone in chat, by the way. I've been paying attention to all the comments. I know we don't interact as much in these streams, but some of these conversations have led to other better conversations in the chat. So thank you, guys. I really do appreciate it. Will we get this up?
Peter's crying for mercy.
I want to
You know
give her a
what?
shout out.
I'll work. I'll work. Yeah, I'll give her a shout out. We'll work on that in the background.
Okay, yeah, we'll get
Let's
that.
see. Particular things I would like to talk about. Yeah. The thing I'm very worried about is so you know how people have been talking about how eye tracking and body tracking, and there's a lot of discussions about neural rights and privacy and what should be done to protect those things. And what I worry about the most, and one of the reasons I talked about it was because I remember what happened with the FDA over regulating medical devices, right? There's an
Mm-hmm.
entire book on it I'm reading right now. And I'm very worried that well-meaning people are going to regulate positive pathways out of existence. I think because the people who are most willing to get up, call themselves bioethicists, and start participating in philosophical debates are usually the kind of precautionary people who are also willing to impose themselves on other people's lives and be like, no, you have to do it this way. You have to ensure privacy through my chosen method. We have to have Congress do XYZ. But we've seen how disastrous it can be when Congress does XYZ, and then all of a sudden men with guns are kicking down your door because you tried selling whole milk, right? Or selling raw milk.
Yes.
Very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. And once something like that is put into place, it is almost impossible to get rid of. So that's one I would really like to say. I would also like to really talk to the people who are working in this industry, who are building hardware and software. I really want you to know what you're actually building, right? You're not
Yes.
making another gadget, a fun little toy that will make you money and people will play with and have a good time. You're not making something that just transports people to other worlds. You're making a part of another person's mind and body that they are willing to assimilate and integrate deeply into their sense of self. Please, please put the time and care that that really deserves when you're making it. I cannot stress how important that is, and that is how people will use it, even if you don't think so right now.
No, I'm not gonna cut you off, but I do want to chime in on that. That was specifically. I actually clipped that and screenshotted it because I was gonna get to it, but specifically you brought that up in one of your articles, and you cannot be more right on that. And I have seen 99% not. I'm not saying they're not going that route because I don't know what their route is, but 99% I cannot validate that they're going that route by their outward actions. Most seem to be figuring it out as they go, which is not, there's nothing wrong with that, but they don't seem like they're taking off. Hey, you got that? Is that the link right there?
Yep,
Here, I'm gonna give
that's
you
my
this.
friend.
I'm gonna give you the screen real quick, and I'm gonna put that up for everyone. But I do want to get into real quick eye tracking as well, because you did bring that up. I'm assuming you've gone down that rabbit hole of what it can and cannot do, correct?
Yeah, so like one of the things I was talking about earlier is there is a very big difference between what you can extract in a lab in perfect conditions with all the time you like to extract the data. It's another thing entirely make it so that you can like figure out everything from data that's happening in real time. Also, hang on, your audio cut out. Can you say something real quick?
Yep, I'm here. I'm actually going to switch the
Okay,
screen
great.
real quick so they don't see my screen. And I'm going to throw this link out to chat so you guys do have it.
Yeah, so I mean, and the other thing is the same reason that people are so scared of these technologies in terms of privacy, because they do give you a lot of power over the person that hooks into them, is also what makes them so overwhelmingly beneficial. For
Yes.
me to give you superpowers, you have to trust me with the data out of your mind and body. It is very difficult for me to design something that truly fits you like a glove, physically and cognitively, without being able to see into your experience and your existence. So like it's one of those things like please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Please don't um, render these miracle technologies inoperative because of a handful of bad actors or because you're worried about how other people might use them. Use some of the techniques we mentioned earlier. Audit the people you're getting your technology from.
Yes.
Learn exactly what it can do. Look at the spec sheet for what you buy, and importantly, I advocate for this very much. Everyone should be proactive and take control in their lives over how they use this technology. Like, I am a developer. I almost always buy the expensive pro developer version of a technology because what you'll notice is that they come with a lot of the safeties off the rails and they don't always come with the same level of telemetry. So, getting some skills for creating any technology, no matter what it is, and learning how human bodies and minds work, even if it takes you a really long time to do, even if you only learn it at a really low resolution, take your evolution as a person into your own hands and fight like hell to become what you want to be. Because if you rely on others to do it all the time, it may not work out.
That is beautifully said. I think if Damo was in the chat, he would give you a big hug. And I'm all for that fully. JC, I think we're hitting about that time, but I want to thank you for coming on. One thing too, as an anecdote, just something I noticed during the stream, you are the first. I'm not gonna you. I'm assuming you don't want to be called a VTuber. I don't want to use the wrong terminology, but you were the first avatar that I've spoken to, whether on chat, whether on private video, in any form. And I will tell you from the start of this conversation, you were an avatar to me, and I've noticed as I watch you, it becomes more and more lifelike. I've noticed the lips moving, and now at this point, and I'm not blowing smoke up anyone's ass, and this is it truly that flow state's been hit by the end of this, where there's a big disconnect between an avatar now and a person, and I think that's what this is really all about. So that was really fun to experience just on my end. But thank you, JCA, for everything you've done for this. I really enjoyed this conversation quite a bit.
Yeah, no problem. See you around.
All right, guys. Thank you again for the chats. This has been a lot of fun. If you want clips of this, it will be up on the secondary channel. I'll put the link in the chat. But as always, everybody, we'll see you next time. Later.